You are listening to the Rachael Maves podcast, and I'm Rachael Maves, your host. Today we are speaking with Missy Testerman. Missy, the 2024 National Teacher of the Year in my home state, Tennessee, has dedicated over 30 years in education at Rogersville City School in Tennessee. She currently serves as the school's ESL specialist and program director, supporting immigrant students and fostering inclusive learning. With a strong belief in empowering educators and building community, she advocates for culturally responsive teaching and teacher voice in education policy. Testerman holds degrees in elementary and reading education and continues to mentor new teachers and lead community programs. Missy, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Rachael. It's always nice to chat with a fellow Tennessean, and I'm thrilled to be here today.
And I'm so excited. Congratulations again. What a huge accomplishment. Having been at TDOE, I know all of the work that happens on the back end and is so exciting. Congratulations again.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm so appreciative to the people at TDOE who helped me work through the process once I was named Tennessee Teacher of the Year to enter into the cohort with the 2024 State Teachers of the Year. And I'm just really thankful, especially for Sarah Brown and Martha Moore, both of whom had a very large part in helping me craft an application that reflected who I am and what I believe in. So I'm always thankful to TDOE for that support.
I love it. Well, we're going to jump right in, and I'm really excited just to get to know you a little bit more and hear more about your story. So tell us why education? What was the draw to choose that career path?
Well, Rachael, I think I knew from the time I was 5 years old. Wasn't any great philosophical moment that happened for me other than that whenever I went to kindergarten, I met my kindergarten teacher. Her name was Mrs. Brown. She was sweet and funny, and I fell in love with her. I fell in love with our classroom, and I just fell in love with the whole process that we go through as humans when we learn things. I can remember just being so proud of other students in my classroom when they would learn things as well, because I thought she was magic. All she had to do was to tell us things and show us things, and I was able to continue throughout my educational career, and I had teachers who invested in me and just showed me that that was the job that I someday wanted to have. So I'm one of those people who never had a doubt they were meant to be a teacher.
From the very beginning, that was the call, right?
From day one.
It's amazing to me how many teachers will say it's this teacher or a whole host of teachers that really poured into me, and I wanted to be able to do the same. It's just, I think it speaks to the career and the pathway of education and the importance of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the power that teachers have to show our students what they could someday be, and that continues even today. So we have teachers out there sowing those seeds every single day.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. So as we think about just education, where things are at right now, what keeps you up at night? And I'm especially interested in kind of twofold. You've had this really rich career in the classroom and have that lens, and you have this lens now of being this national teacher and having conversations in a much different space. I'd love to hear from both sides what really is keeping you up at night.
I would love to tell you that those are two separate answers, but what I saw, last year, I'm on leave during my year of service as the National Teacher of the Year, but what I saw in the classroom over the past few years, past 2 to 3 years, is what I'm seeing reflected in classrooms around the country. The struggles that the teachers in my school system face are the same struggles that teachers are facing. And a lot of it centers around coming out of the pandemic. So I think that there's this thought that we should be over all of this because the pandemic is over. But when you've only lived on this earth 7 or 8 years, And 2 to 3 years of your life, your formative years, were spent in a pandemic when there were not the same routines in place. That's going to play a part in our students' development. And we're still seeing that. Obviously, there's unfinished learning. Teachers worked so hard during the pandemic. I know because I was a teacher during the pandemic, and it's the hardest that my colleagues and I ever worked, but it's not the same as being able to build a relationship with students who are in your classroom every single day. And that's been part of it. Also, a lot of the disruption has taken an emotional toll on our students. We're in the midst of a student mental health crisis, and that's everything from really young students who aren't able to regulate themselves or their behavior, all the way through our middle schoolers and high schoolers who are dealing with, issues of anxiety and depression. And that's placed a lot on the shoulders of teachers who already had a lot on their shoulders to begin with. So I think it is just seeing that so many students and teachers are still struggling, but our teachers, no matter what, they just keep plugging away and they keep working so hard, and so much has been added to them, and yet they just keep doing so much. But deep inside, because I'm a little older and I know how hard this job is, and when you can't keep up a certain level of emotional and physical exertion without getting exhausted, I worry long term about what this is doing to the teaching profession. We know that lots of teachers had left the field, and we've got to figure out a way to keep our best and brightest teachers in the classroom because we need them more than ever. So probably that for me is the big thing that keeps me up at night.
Yeah. Before we get into some ideas to move forward, I just wanted to pause a little bit on one of the things that you said about the unregulated behavior, especially younger and younger. And even prior to the pandemic, I was starting to hear that often when I was at the county office and then at the state, of directors and superintendents saying, we're seeing behaviors that we saw in middle school, we're now starting to see in like first grade and kindergarten. And this opens up a whole different door of how do we deal with this and what does this mean and look like? And I mean, I just love your thoughts on that because you've had such a long career in education. Is that something that you experience as well? And as you're looking at that kind of trajectory, some of those things getting pushed down earlier and earlier from students?
Unfortunately, it is. I saw some of it when I was still in the general classroom. I taught first and second grades for 30 years. And like you said, right before the pandemic, we were seeing more of those dysregulation type issues, 100%. It seems to be even more so after the pandemic, and it's harder and harder for these little ones to regulate their behavior. And the reality is, when you have that situation going on in your classroom, it isn't just that one student who's affected. It's every other student. It's the teacher dealing with it. It's whoever comes to the aid of the teacher dealing with it. The first year that I was in the role that I am now, being the ESL teacher, because when you're the ESL teacher, you're all over the place and there's some travel within the building. I was shocked at how many battles and fires that our teachers are having to fight every single day just to survive. And that's emotionally hard. It's hard for other students in the classroom. It's hard for adults who are intervening. So I appreciate that you acknowledge that's something that you've also seen, because unless you're in that setting, you don't often understand what that looks like, how disruptive it is, and how mentally heavy it is for the adult dealing with it.
Yeah. Well, and just what an additional barrier to an already complex position that now we're having to navigate in a way that we just didn't before. And like dealing with middle schoolers and high schoolers, and those behaviors is very different than primary grades. And so when it's brought down to primary grades, then it's a whole new beats of trying to figure out how do we navigate this with kids that are so young.
Yes, because, our middle schoolers and high schoolers, they care a lot about what their peers think.
Yes, that's right.
A 5-year-old who's upset that the iPad is going back into the cart, they just do not care what their peers think. So, that's an entirely, as someone who's witnessed both ends of that, I've been in classrooms and situations where I've seen an 8th grader have a meltdown and I've seen a kindergartner. I will almost take the 8th grade meltdown any day of the week.
Yeah.
Because the 8th grader still has some care about what his or her peers think. That 5-year-old in that moment, they've not learned those regulative behaviors yet.
Well, developmentally, they're doing a whole different place. Yeah.
Yes.
All of the great things that we just talked about and some of the things that we're seeing in the field. What are 2 ways that you feel like we could move forward?
I feel like that we have to start from a human-centered approach. I feel like that relationships have to be in place so that while teachers are delivering academic content, they still have time to engage with students and make sure they're learning what they're supposed to be and that they're able to offer support along the way. So I suppose the first part of that for me is that we have to lead with relationships because relationships are actually an academic strategy.
That's right.
When students know that you care and students have this feeling of, hey, she's depending on me to do well because that shows her that I'm learning, I think that you're always going to have better student outcomes. So we have to lead with relationships. And probably, Rachel, the most important thing is that we have to empower our teachers to be co-designers and not just implementers. For a really long time, we've continued to just give things to teachers and be like, hey, here's this program, here's this technology, it's what you're going to do. And we haven't really used the input of teachers who can already tell you what's going to work and what won't work. So our teachers have a lot of programs being thrust on them, but we really need their input to shape what happens next because unfortunately in any organization, a top-down approach is always questionable because the people closest to the students, the people doing the work, the teachers, a lot of times have the least amount of input. And that's a problem, all across our country. So we have to listen to our teachers and their expertise.
Yeah, I love that. I want to just come back really quickly to the relationship building. I think for me, when I was in the classroom, Missy, I often think this is such an easy piece, but then sometimes it's not. And being able to have and share with other educators, what are those really simple ways in which you can connect with students that show them that you care. And I'll give a quick example of my own, but I would love your thoughts on this. One of the things that I taught high school. I was a former high school English teacher. And at the beginning of every year, now there's technology that can do this, but I would have a piece of paper that said, give me your name, your parents' information, cell phone number. So just in case I could call and connect with them, but then also ask them what was their $1.50 something. So on those days where it was just, they're having the worst day possible, like the Alexander, no good, terrible, horrible, bad day. What is that thing that just fills your bucket? And then every once in a while when something would come up, I would share that with the student. And it was simple, like a bag of Skittles or, something like that. But it was like I see you, that just meant the world to them. And I think it's things like that sometimes that we miss. But I love easy things that come to mind for you that you've done or you've seen.
And I will tell you, Rachel, I love that story. And it is teachers like you who did those things that are the little things that are really the big things that my own children, who are adults now, reflect on later in life. They don't remember awesome lessons and those things, but they remember that after you had a concussion in a ball game, that someone heated up mac and cheese for you because you were still confused about how to use the lunch line. So those are the things that students remember. I spend most of my career teaching really young students, and probably the most simple thing that you can do is to, greet them at the door every day. You're not busy when they get there because you're just happy to see them. And I learned so many things in those 30-second interactions as they came in. And also when they're having snack time, if you have little ones, just sit down at a table, because students will talk when they're eating and they'll kind of forget where they are and open up to you. And one of my favorite things to do with my middle schoolers in the role I have now is to have lunch with them, because they get in there and they tell you everything going on with everyone and things that are bothering them. And that doesn't cost a dime. Occasionally I bring cookies, or, my students have never had apple pie, and apple pie is supposed to be the American dessert.
Yeah.
But most of the time they just show up on Wednesdays for lunch. It doesn't cost anything, and I get to spend time with them. They look forward to it. And in my case, as an ESL teacher, it's a perfect opportunity to practice speaking skills as well, in a sneaky way.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah, it's funny because the greeting at the door, Missy, I always thought was the best idea. And it was something I incorporated even with the high school kid. Because I think sometimes we think high schoolers, they're too cool. They don't want to engage. But there's so many things that work with kindergartners that also work with the high schoolers.
I told everyone when I moved into this role, because I teach in a pre-K through 8th grade building, that 8th graders are really just like 2nd graders who are maybe not as cute and don't smell as good, but it's the same kid in a bigger body. And that's the truth.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, this is our last question that I'm always curious to see people's response to is, what question in education are we not asking that we really should be?
That one's really, really, really hard. But for me, Rachel, I think it is simply the question, what does enough look like? When is enough enough? And here's why I say that. We keep adding more and more things to the plates of our teachers. Every single legislative session in every state across the country, there are bills passed into law that mandate teachers must now teach this, schools must teach this. Well, our students are only with us a limited amount of time per day. And we keep adding more and more and more things that teachers and schools must do. And we're not subtracting anything, more programs, more expectations. And all of these things lead, unfortunately, to more assessments and more testing that takes away from the time that teachers would like to be teaching. So for me, and as a quiet observer this year of and having conversations with teachers from across the country, and also through my State Teacher of the Year cohort, it is, when is enough enough? When do we decide what's really important, and what do we need to teach to create well-rounded students who are kind, who have compassion for each other and humanity. Yeah. But when is enough? For me, I think that's the biggest thing. We only have so many hours in a day, and it's like, and you'll hear that even in conversations. I was at church the other day, and someone didn't know how to they didn't know how to fold the bulletin thing into thirds. They had just put the stack of church bulletins out instead of folding them into thirds, because that's, it takes a long time. And so we were watching some other adults struggle with that, and someone said they need to teach that in schools, and I just cringed because it was like, when do we have the time to do that, really? So, and that's just a little example, but you hear that so many times, that needs to be taught in school. It feels like we're teaching everything already. So for me, it would be, when is enough, and what can we take away that will make our teachers have more time to actually teach the things that are going to impact these students in the future?
Yeah, I appreciate that one, Missy. Of all the podcasts that we've done so far, I haven't heard that one. And I think that you're right, it is critical, because especially lately, it feels like there has been just a lot more legislation coming on, as if education or schools are going to be the vehicle for whatever's happening in this exterior piece in society right now. And it's a big lift. Yeah. Well, thank you, Missy, for your time today. I just really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Rachael. I've loved talking with you, and I appreciate you inviting me on here and for your work, keeping the challenges that we face and the successes that we get to witness, front and center on your podcast. I really appreciate you and your work.
Thank you. Friendly reminder, everyone, that Parsec Education's early bird sale for the summit is live. Get 50% off tickets for the 2026 Measure What We Value Summit happening February 4th through 5th in Fresno, California. Don't miss this limited time offer and the opportunity to experience our incredible MC Brandon Leak, Season 15 winner of America's Got Talent. Secure your tickets now at parsecsummit.com.